I am Gage, 32 years old, and I've always been the different one in my family. All my life, I was systematically excluded from every family wedding, labeled as too different, too much, or simply not fitting in. So when it came time for my own wedding, I decided to create something truly unforgettable without them. I never expected my celebration would make the newspaper, or that my estranged family would show up at my doorstep, faces twisted with fury, demanding to know why they weren't invited. Before I tell you what happened when I opened that door, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe if you want more stories about standing your ground against family rejection. Growing up in Millfield, Indiana, a town so small it barely registered on maps, was challenging for someone like me. My family prided themselves on tradition and conservatism. The men hunted, watched football, and worked with their hands. The women kept beautiful homes, organized church events, and raised children who followed the same path. But from my earliest memories, I was drawn to different things. At age 5, while my cousins were playing catch in the backyard, I was inside arranging flowers I had picked from my grandmother's garden. By 7, I was sketching clothing designs and putting on theatrical performances for whoever would watch. My bedroom walls weren't covered with sports posters, but with art I had created. My bookshelf wasn't filled with adventure stories, but with books about fashion, theater, and art history from the local library. The first time I truly understood I was considered different was at my 7th birthday party. I had begged for an art set instead of the usual boyish gifts, and when I opened it, my face lit up with such joy. I immediately started drawing, creating a portrait of my mother in vibrant colors. While my grandmother Eliza clapped with delight, I noticed the uncomfortable glances between my father and Uncle Frank. "Boys don't usually get so excited about art stuff," Uncle Frank muttered to my father. Not quite quietly enough. My father nodded, his disappointment visible even to my young eyes. "It is just a phase," he responded, the words stinging me. Even then, Grandmother Eliza became my secret ally. When no one was watching, she would slip me art magazines and tell me stories about famous male artists throughout history. "Never dim your light for anyone, Gage," she would whisper. "The world needs color and beauty too much for that." My first experience with family wedding exclusion happened when I was 10. My cousin Tanya was getting married, and everyone was attending, except me. When I asked why, my mother said I was too young, but I later saw photos with my 8-year-old cousin Tommy smiling in them. When I asked again, the answer changed. "Well, Gage, you sometimes make people uncomfortable with your, enthusiasm," my mother explained hesitantly. "Some people just don't understand your energy." That same year, at Uncle Patrick's wedding, I was allowed to attend, but was constantly monitored. I had excitedly picked out my outfit, a blue button-up shirt with a colorful bow tie that Grandmother Eliza had helped me find. During the reception, I was dancing joyfully when Uncle Frank pulled me aside. "Can't you just act normal for one day?" he hissed, straightening my bow tie roughly. "Everyone is staring at you." I looked around and saw no one was watching us. But his words made me feel like there was a spotlight on me, illuminating all my differences. My mother's reactions to these situations were always conflicted. Sometimes she defended me, like when she told Uncle Frank to leave me alone that day. Other times, she would gently suggest I tone it down around family. "Just for a little while, honey," she would say. "Just until they get to know the real you." But how could they get to know the real me if I was always hiding it? My father was a man of few words, but his silence spoke volumes. He would watch me from across rooms, with a mixture of confusion and disappointment. Whenever I showed interest in something he approved of, like when I briefly tried baseball. He would suddenly become animated, as if this was the moment his real son had finally appeared. By 12, I had learned to create two versions of myself. There was Public Gage, who was quieter, who kept his hands in his pockets instead of gesturing expressively, who nodded along to conversations about sports I didn't follow. Then there was Private Gage, who came alive in the safety of my bedroom, where I kept a treasure box under my bed, filled with fashion sketches, theater programs from local productions I had begged to see, and colorful scarves Grandmother Eliza had given me. "This is just until you are old enough to live your own life," she told me once when she caught me crying after being mocked by cousins at a family barbecue. "Then you get to decide who you invite into your world." I didn't know then how prophetic her words would be, or how many family occasions I would be excluded from before I finally created a celebration that was true to myself, without a single family member in attendance. My teenage years brought both clarity and challenges. As I grew more comfortable in my own skin, the gap between me and my family widened. I joined the theater club at school, discovered a passion for photography, and began experimenting with fashion in ways that made me feel alive, but made my family visibly uncomfortable. Each expression of my true self seemed to push them further away. The first major exclusion that really wounded me happened when I was 16. My cousin Daniel, who was only 2 years older than me and had been somewhat of a childhood friend, was getting married to his high school sweetheart. Everyone in the extended family received invitations except me. When I asked my parents about it, the response was a carefully constructed excuse. "There aren't enough seats at the venue," my mother explained, not quite meeting my eyes. They had to make some tough decisions about the guest list. I might have believed this if I hadn't seen the social media photos afterward. The venue was a large country club with plenty of empty chairs visible in the background. Every single family member was there, including distant cousins I had only met once or twice. Looking through those photos, seeing the empty spaces where I could have been, felt like being erased from the family portrait. I confronted my parents with the evidence, tears streaming down my face. "Why do you keep lying to me? Just tell me the truth for once." After an uncomfortable silence, my father cleared his throat. "Daniel and his fiancée thought you might make some of the guests uncomfortable. They wanted a traditional wedding." "Uncomfortable how?" I demanded, though I already knew the answer. "You know how you are, Gage," my mother said softly. "You're just so different from everyone else." The pattern continued with increasing frequency. When Uncle Ray announced his wedding to his second wife when I was 17, I was told it was an adults-only ceremony. Yet when the photos surfaced online, I spotted my 14-year-old cousin Natalie and several other teenagers in attendance. The excuse shifted from adults only to immediate family only, despite the fact that Uncle Ray was my father's brother, making me very much immediate family. Aunt Pamela's wedding a few months later came with a different excuse. "We need you to watch the house while we're gone," my mother said. "Someone needs to take care of the dog." This despite the fact that we had always previously boarded our dog at the local kennel during family trips. When I suggested that solution, suddenly there were financial concerns that had never existed before. The excuses grew weaker, and my parents became less committed to maintaining them. It became an unspoken understanding that Gage simply didn't attend family weddings. The pattern was established, and no one questioned it anymore. Not even me. At least, not out loud. My high school graduation marked another turning point. After years of careful consideration and therapy with a supportive school counselor, I decided to come out as gay. I had known for years, but had kept this part of myself hidden, along with my other differences. My friends at school embraced me with open arms, but at home, the news was met with a painful silence, followed by my father's comment. "This is just another way for you to be different, isn't it?" That fall, I left for art school in New York City, with a lightness I had never experienced before. For the first time, I was going somewhere where being different wasn't just accepted, it was celebrated. The distance from my family wasn't just geographical, it was emotional, and I found myself breathing easier with each mile between us. In New York, I found my chosen family, Damon, my first roommate, who introduced me to the underground fashion scene. Layla, a brilliant photographer who saw the world in angles and light I had never considered. Kyle, a dancer whose apartment became our gathering place every Sunday for what we called chosen family dinner. They accepted me without question, celebrated my successes, and held me through disappointments. Family isn't always blood, Damon told me once as we sat on the rooftop of our apartment building, watching the city lights. Family is whoever sees your true self and loves you because of it, not despite it. With them, I never had to be public gauge. I could just be me, all the time. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything. As I built my new life in New York, my passion for design and aesthetics evolved into a promising career. By 25, I had established myself as an up-and-coming fashion stylist and event designer, known for creating unique experiences that told visual stories. My work began appearing in small publications, and I developed a reputation for transforming ordinary spaces into immersive artistic environments. During those years, my contact with family became limited to obligatory holiday calls and the occasional visit home for Christmas, which always left me feeling drained and diminished. I would spend days preparing mentally, rehearsing neutral topics of conversation, and steeling myself against the inevitable comments about my New York lifestyle or questions about when I would settle down into something more practical. Everything changed when I met Jason. It happened at a gallery opening where I had designed the layout for an emerging photographer's first major exhibition. I was adjusting the lighting on a particularly striking image when someone beside me said, "The way you positioned that, it's like the light is having a conversation with the shadows." When I turned, I saw a man with kind eyes and an infectious smile. Jason was an architect who specialized in sustainable design, creating spaces that honored both the environment and the communities they served. Our connection was immediate and powerful, like recognizing a language I had always known but never spoken. Our first date lasted 12 hours, from coffee in the morning to stargazing on the High Line, well past midnight. With Jason, conversations flowed effortlessly from art to social justice, from childhood dreams to future aspirations. He listened when I shared stories about growing up feeling like an outsider in my own family, never dismissing my pain or suggesting I was overreacting. "People fear what challenges their understanding of the world," he said. "Your authenticity is a mirror they aren't ready to look into." After 2 years of dating, I took the significant step of bringing Jason home for Thanksgiving. I had prepared him for what to expect, but nothing could have truly readied him for the reality of my family dynamics. Throughout the visit, my mother made strained attempts at inclusion, while my father barely acknowledged Jason's presence. Uncle Frank made pointed comments about traditional family values, while various cousins created a physical distance between themselves and us at the dinner table, as if our relationship might be contagious. Jason handled it all with grace, never losing his warm smile or thoughtful responses. But I saw the hurt in his eyes when my father referred to him as my friend, despite multiple corrections, and the way his hand tightened around mine under the table when Aunt Pamela asked if he had tried dating women. The most painful exclusion came shortly after that visit. My younger sister, Allison, who had once been my closest ally in the family before gradually conforming to their expectations, got married without even telling me. I discovered it through social media, scrolling through my feed to find congratulatory posts and photos of the entire family gathered at a beautiful lakeside ceremony. Every single family member was there. Every single one, except me. I called Allison immediately, my hands shaking so badly I could hardly hold the phone. "Why?" was all I could manage at first. Why didn't you even tell me? There was a long pause before she answered. The family thought you and Jason would make everyone uncomfortable. It was easier this way. Easier for who, Allison? Certainly not for me. Finding out my own sister got married through Facebook. I'm sorry, Gage, she said, though her voice lacked genuine remorse. Mom and Dad thought it was best. And what did you think? Did you stand up for me at all? The silence that followed was answer enough. My parents had promised after the last exclusion that they would do better, that they would stand up for me. Those promises evaporated like morning mist when actually tested. I hung up without saying goodbye and fell into a depression that lasted for months. Jason was my rock during that period. He held me through nights when grief overwhelmed me, never rushing my healing or suggesting I simply cut ties with my family. He understood the complex pain of loving people who couldn't fully love you back. I began seeing Dr. Powell, a therapist specializing in family trauma and LGBTQ+ issues. With her guidance, I started to understand that my family's treatment wasn't a reflection of my worth but of their limitations. You cannot set yourself on fire to keep others warm, she told me during one particularly difficult session. Protecting your heart isn't selfish. It's necessary. As I worked through my pain, my professional life flourished. I secured bigger clients, designed events that were featured in design magazines, and built a reputation for creating authentic, emotionally resonant experiences. The irony wasn't lost on me that I had made a career out of creating celebratory spaces for others while being excluded from celebrations in my own family. Jason and I moved into our first apartment together, a small but light-filled space in Brooklyn that we transformed into a haven. Every object, color, and texture was chosen to express our combined aesthetic and to create a home where both of us felt completely free to be ourselves. It became our sanctuary, the place where we never had to diminish our light. In that apartment, surrounded by chosen family for dinner parties and movie nights, I began to redefine what celebration meant to me, and I never imagined how that redefinition would one day create a wedding so authentically us that it would make headlines and bring my estranged family angrily to my door. On a crisp autumn evening 3 years into our relationship, Jason took me to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, a place we had visited on our third date. As we wandered through the modern art wing, he led me to a quiet corner where a small crowd had gathered around what appeared to be a new installation. When the crowd parted, I saw a simple pedestal with a small architectural model on it, a perfect miniature house with tiny lights glowing warmly from within. I designed it, Jason said softly. It's us, our future home. As I leaned closer to see the exquisite details, I noticed something glinting inside the tiny living room. There, in the center of the miniature space, was a ring. I want to build a life with you, Gage, Jason said, taking my hands. Will you marry me? The joy that flooded through me was immediately followed by a wave of anxiety. Marriage meant a wedding. A wedding meant decisions about family. My complicated feelings must have shown on my face because Jason quickly added, however and whenever you want. It can be just us if that feels right. I said yes, through tears of both happiness and conflict. That night, as we celebrated with champagne in our apartment, the question of family hovered unspoken between us. The next few weeks were filled with congratulations from friends and colleagues, but I delayed calling my parents. When I finally did, my mother's first question after a brief congratulations was, will it be a traditional ceremony? We haven't decided on details yet, I said carefully. Well, you know how important tradition is to your father, she replied. And the family. The same family that had excluded me from every wedding. The irony was almost too much to bear. Over the next month, Jason and I discussed our options. His parents, who had welcomed me with genuine warmth from our first meeting, were supportive of whatever we decided. It's your day, his mother said. It should reflect who you are. I spent several sessions with Dr. Powell, working through my feelings about potentially not inviting my biological family. Am I being petty? I asked her. Using my wedding as revenge? There's a difference between revenge and boundaries, she replied. Revenge is about hurting others. Boundaries are about protecting yourself. After much soul-searching, Jason and I decided to create a celebration that was authentically us, without compromising to accommodate people who had repeatedly rejected me. Our guest list would include only people who had shown us genuine love and support. When I shared our decision with our close friends over dinner, Layla suggested I might regret not giving my family one more chance. Being the bigger person can be healing sometimes, she said gently. I've been the bigger person my entire life, I replied. I've shrunk myself, hidden parts of who I am, and still been found wanting. This one day, I just want to be my full self, without apology. Damon raised his glass. To a wedding where no one has to be anything but completely themselves. With our decision made, wedding planning became an exciting creative project. We secured an art gallery in Chelsea that featured emerging artists, a space with soaring ceilings and walls that would be filled with interactive installations designed by friends in the art community. Instead of traditional wedding colors, we chose a vibrant palette that would transform throughout the evening, representing the evolution of our relationship. Our attire would be anything but conventional. We worked with a designer friend to create suits that expressed our individual personalities while complementing each other. Mine featured subtle structural elements inspired by architecture, honoring Jason's passion, while his incorporated textile patterns based on my design work. As word spread about our plans, the inevitable happened. My cousin Ryan, who lived in New Jersey, ran into me at a coffee shop during a visit to the city. So, I hear congratulations are in order, he said awkwardly. Thank you, I replied, bracing myself for what might come next. The family is wondering about the wedding. When it might be. I took a deep breath. We're keeping it intimate. Just close friends and Jason's family. Ryan's expression hardened. After all the family has done for you, this is how you repay them? By excluding everyone? The hypocrisy was so staggering I almost laughed. All the family has done for me? You mean like excluding me from every family wedding for the past 16 years? That was different, he insisted. Those were traditional ceremonies. And this is my life, I replied, gathering my things to leave. Please give everyone my best. That encounter was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I received a manipulative voicemail from my mother, claiming she just wanted to be there for her son's special day. There was an email from Allison expressing that she deserved to be included, despite having excluded me from her own wedding. Uncle Frank even reached out through social media to inform me that I was breaking my parents' hearts. Each contact triggered anxiety attacks that left me questioning our decision. During one particularly difficult night, Jason held me as I struggled to breathe through the panic. We can change the plan if you want, he offered. Whatever makes this easier for you. But Dr. Powell's words kept coming back to me. You have the right to protect your special day. You have the right to be surrounded only by people who celebrate all of who you are. The contrast between Jason's parents and mine became even more pronounced during this time. While my parents pressured and manipulated, his offered only support. They helped with planning, respected our creative vision even when it differed from their more traditional tastes, and never once made us feel judged for our choices. As the wedding day approached, my anxiety began to give way to excitement. We had created something that truly represented us, a celebration that honored our journey and the community that had supported us. Whatever happened with my biological family, this day would be authentic, joyful, and completely ours. I woke on our wedding day to sunlight streaming through the windows and Jason's side of the bed already empty. We had decided to honor the tradition of not seeing each other before the ceremony, the only conventional element in our otherwise unique celebration. A note on his pillow read simply, "Today we make official what my heart has known from the start. I love all of you, without exception or condition." Damon, Kyle, and Layla arrived at the apartment an hour later, arms full of coffee and pastries, faces bright with excitement. "Today's the day the world gets to see what love really looks like," Damon announced, pulling me into a hug. The morning passed in a blur of activity. We got ready in the apartment, helping each other with cufflinks and pocket squares, pausing occasionally to toast with mimosas and share memories of how our chosen family had formed. There were tears mixed with laughter, particularly when Kyle recounted the disaster that was my first attempt at cooking dinner for the group. "You set off the fire alarm in 3 separate apartments," he reminded me, "but refused to order takeout because you wanted us to have a home-cooked meal. Some might call that stubborn," I laughed. "I prefer passionately committed. That passion is why we love you," Layla said softly, "and why today is going to be extraordinary." When we arrived at the gallery, I was overwhelmed by the transformation. The space we had visited dozens of times during planning had become a living work of art. Walls that were once white now displayed projections that slowly shifted through a spectrum of colors. Suspended from the ceiling were hundreds of crystalline structures that caught and reflected light in mesmerizing patterns. Each corner of the gallery featured a different interactive art installation. In one, guests could write messages on translucent paper that would then be incorporated into a growing sculpture. In another, a digital display transformed visitors' movements into cascades of color and light. It was exactly what we had envisioned, a celebration where art, emotion, and community intertwined. Our custom-designed suits exceeded all expectations. Mine was a deep blue with subtle structural elements that created an almost architectural silhouette, while Jason's was a complementary shade with textile patterns inspired by my design work. Different but harmonious, just like us. As guests arrived, I was struck by the genuine joy on every face. These were people who had seen us at our best and worst, who had supported our relationship from the beginning. There was no tension, no one whispering disapprovingly in corners or making awkward small talk, just authentic connection and celebration. When the time came for the ceremony, Kyle and Damon stood beside me as my best men. Their speech brought both laughter and tears as they recounted the journey from the day we all met to this moment. "Some people search their whole lives for a place they truly belong," Kyle said. "Gage, you not only found that place, you created it. First in your heart, and then in the world around you." Jason's parents approached me before he entered, his mother taking both my hands in hers. "From this day forward, you are family," she said firmly. "Not just in name, but in all the ways that matter. Our home is your home. Our hearts are your sanctuary." The simple words healed something in me I hadn't realized was still broken. When Jason appeared, the entire room seemed to brighten. Our eyes locked, and in that moment, all the doubt and pain of the past vanished. This was right. This was home. We had written our own vows, promises that spoke not just of love, but of seeing and honoring each other's true selves. "I vow to create space for all of who you are," I told Jason, my voice steady despite the emotion welling in my chest. "To celebrate your light, rather than ask you to dim it. To build a home where neither of us ever has to be less to make others comfortable." Jason's vows echoed similar themes of acceptance and authentic love. "I promise to stand beside you as you become more fully yourself. Not despite your differences, but because of them. In you, I have found not just a partner, but a home for my truest self." Instead of traditional unity rituals, we released dozens of butterflies into a garden area of the gallery, symbols of transformation and the beauty that comes from being exactly what you are meant to be. The reception was unlike any wedding celebration I had ever attended. Local artists performed throughout the evening, and a friend who was a talented painter created a live work of art, capturing the energy and emotion of the gathering. The dance floor remained packed as music shifted from classic love songs to pulsing club beats and back again. Andrea, a well-known wedding photographer who had agreed to document our day, moved through the crowd, capturing candid moments of joy and connection. "This is something special," she told me during a brief quiet moment. "This needs to be shared with the world. It's not just a wedding. It's a statement about what love and celebration can be." As I looked around at the vibrant, joyful scene, I couldn't help but contrast it with the family weddings I had been excluded from. Those had been about tradition and conformity. This was about authentic expression and unconditional acceptance. Those had been about maintaining appearances. This was about revealing our true selves. The difference was as stark as night and day. Late in the evening, Jason and I slipped away to the rooftop terrace of the gallery. The New York skyline sparkled around us as we took a moment to absorb everything that had happened. "We did it," I said softly. "We created the celebration we deserved." "We did more than that," Jason replied, taking my hand. "We created a new tradition, one based on love without conditions." As we returned to the reception for the final hour of celebration, surrounded by people who loved us exactly as we were, I felt complete in a way I never had before. Yes, there was still an emptiness where my biological family should have been, but it no longer felt like a wound. It was simply a space I had learned to fill, with chosen family, with authentic connection, and with self-acceptance. We fell asleep that night, exhausted but content, ready to depart the next morning for our honeymoon in Japan. A 2-week adventure exploring art, architecture, and culture together as husbands. Little did I know that our return would bring an unexpected and explosive confrontation with the family I had finally made peace with leaving behind. After 2 blissful weeks exploring Japan, Jason and I returned to our Brooklyn apartment to find both our phones exploding with notifications. Friends were texting and calling about something that had appeared in the Sunday New York Times style section. Confused and jet-lagged, I scrolled through my messages until I found one from Layla with a link attached. When I clicked it, I was stunned to see a striking full-page feature about our wedding, prominently displayed in the prestigious newspaper. The headline read, "Redefining Celebration, the Wedding That Broke All Rules." The article was accompanied by Andrea's breathtaking photographs, capturing the vibrant atmosphere, the interactive art installations, and the palpable joy of the celebration. The centerpiece was a particularly powerful image of Jason and I during our first dance, surrounded by a kaleidoscope of light and color, our faces radiating pure happiness. "Did you know about this?" I asked Jason, who looked equally shocked. Andrea mentioned submitting some photos for publication, but I never imagined something this major, he replied, scrolling through the article on his phone. The feature was beautifully written, describing our wedding as a revolutionary approach to celebration that prioritizes authentic expression over tradition and a testament to creating spaces where love can exist without compromise. It detailed the interactive elements, the community of artists involved, and briefly mentioned that the celebration included only chosen family rather than biological relatives. What neither of us anticipated was how quickly the story would spread. The Times article was picked up by design blogs, LGBTQ+ publications, and eventually made its way to small-town newspapers, including the Millfield County Register in my hometown. The first indication that my family had seen the feature came in the form of an angry voicemail from my father 3 days after our return. "How could you embarrass us like this?" his voice demanded, tense with controlled fury. "Everyone in town is talking about it. Your mother can barely show her face at church. Call us immediately." I deleted the message without responding. Over the next 2 days, texts and calls poured in from various family members, ranging from expressions of hurt from my mother to self-righteous indignation from uncles and cousins. Allison sent a particularly stinging message. "I can't believe you would air family business in a national newspaper. So selfish." The irony that they were more concerned about public perception than the years of exclusion and pain they had caused me was not lost on me. I discussed the situation with Dr. Powell in an emergency session. "They're not angry that they hurt you," she observed. "They're angry that others might know they hurt you. That's a significant difference." 3 days after returning from our honeymoon, the confrontation I had both feared and perhaps unconsciously wanted finally arrived. Jason and I were organizing our travel souvenirs when the doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I opened the door, I found myself face to face with a delegation of my family. My parents, sister Allison, and uncles Frank and Ray. My mother's eyes were red from crying, my father's face was set in stone, and everyone else looked like they were attending a funeral rather than visiting their newly married relative. No one offered congratulations, or even a basic greeting. "We need to talk," my father said, his voice leaving no room for refusal. Aware that our neighbors might notice the tense gathering in the hallway, I reluctantly invited them inside. Jason appeared from the bedroom, quickly assessed the situation, and asked if I wanted him to stay or give us privacy. "Stay," I said firmly. "This involves both of us." Once everyone was uncomfortably settled in our living room, my mother broke the heavy silence, tears streaming down her face. "How could you exclude us from the most important day of your life?" she asked, her voice breaking. "And then put it in a newspaper for everyone to see?" Before I could respond, Allison jumped in, her voice sharp with indignation. "Family should be at weddings, Gage. Do you have any idea how this makes us look?" I couldn't contain a bitter laugh at that. "Family should be at weddings? Like how I was at yours, Allison?" "Oh, wait. I wasn't even told it was happening until I saw the photos online." Uncle Frank shifted forward, eyes narrowing. "That was different. Your lifestyle choices, and this spectacle you created, aren't what weddings are supposed to be about." "And what are they supposed to be about, Uncle Frank?" I asked, feeling a strange calm settling over me. "Because from where I stand, they should be about celebrating love and commitment with people who actually support you." My father, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. "Do you have any idea what people are saying? The questions we're having to answer?" The Millers at church showed us the newspaper. The Millers, Gage. It was telling that his concern was entirely about public perception rather than the pain that had led to my decision. In that moment, I realized I had been waiting for this confrontation for years, perhaps my entire life. All the words I had swallowed, all the hurt I had internalized, rose to the surface. "Let me explain something to all of you," I said, my voice steady despite the emotion behind it. I was excluded from Daniel's wedding at 16 with the excuse that there weren't enough seats, which I later found out was a lie. I was told Uncle Ray's wedding was adults only, yet younger cousins were there. I wasn't even informed about Allison's wedding until after it happened. I looked at each family member individually as I continued. For years, I diminished myself, hid who I was, tried to be what you wanted, and it was never enough. So when it came time for my wedding, I made a decision to surround myself only with people who love me completely, not despite who I am, but because of it. Jason moved to stand beside me, his hand finding mine in silent support. "As for the newspaper," I continued, "we didn't seek that out. A photographer thought our celebration was beautiful enough to share with the world, and it was beautiful. Precisely because everyone there was fully present and fully accepting. No one was asking anyone else to be smaller, or different, or less authentic." My mother was crying openly now. Allison looked away, unable to meet my gaze. Uncle Frank's face was flushed with anger, while Uncle Ray studied the floor with sudden interest. My father remained stone-faced, but I could see a muscle working in his jaw. "I don't expect you to understand our wedding," I concluded, "but I do expect you to acknowledge that you can't exclude someone from every family celebration and then be surprised when they create their own celebration without you. Actions have consequences." After a tense silence, my mother spoke through her tears. "We never meant to hurt you, Gage. We just didn't know how to handle someone so different from what we expected. That's the problem," I replied softly. "You never tried to know me at all. You only tried to change me." Uncle Frank stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. We came here for an apology, not to be lectured about your feelings." "If you came for an apology, you came to the wrong place," Jason said, speaking for the first time. His voice was calm but firm. "Gage has nothing to apologize for." I squeezed his hand in gratitude before making my position clear. "If you want to be part of my life going forward, it has to be on new terms. You accept all of who I am, without conditions or expectations that I'll somehow become someone different. Otherwise, this is where our relationship ends." The ultimatum hung in the air like a physical thing. Uncle Frank stormed out first, muttering about this generation and their demands. Uncle Ray followed quietly, pausing only briefly at the door, with what might have been regret in his eyes. Allison left next, her expression conflicted, but her posture defensive. My parents lingered, seemingly caught between worlds. My mother reached toward me but stopped short of actual contact. "We love you, Gage," she said. "We just don't know how to do this." "Love isn't supposed to be conditional," I replied gently. "Start there and see where it takes you." They left without further comment, their silence speaking volumes about the uncertain future of our relationship. As the door closed behind them, I felt an unexpected lightness. I had finally spoken my complete truth without filtering or diminishing it. Jason pulled me into a tight embrace as soon as they were gone. "I am so incredibly proud of you," he whispered against my hair. That took more courage than most people show in a lifetime. Later that evening, as we processed the confrontation with our chosen family over dinner, I recounted every moment, still somewhat in disbelief that it had actually happened. "They really showed up expecting you to apologize," Kyle marveled, shaking his head. "The audacity is almost impressive. What matters is that you stood your ground," Layla said. "You claimed your right to be fully yourself." As we were finishing dinner, my phone buzzed with a text from an unexpected source. My cousin Emma, the youngest daughter of Uncle Ray, had sent a simple message. "I saw the article. Your wedding looked amazing. I hope someday I can be as brave as you are about living authentically. Congratulations." It was a small gesture, but it represented something significant. Perhaps the next generation might break the cycle. Perhaps there was hope for change, even if it came slowly. That night, in a session with Dr. Powell, I reflected on the confrontation and its aftermath. "How do you feel now that you've had this conversation you've been preparing for most of your life?" she asked. "Lighter," I replied after consideration. Not because I expect them to change, but because I finally stood in my truth without flinching. Whatever happens next, I know I've been completely honest about who I am and what I need. She nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "That, Gage, is the foundation of true freedom." A year passed since that doorstep confrontation, a year of significant changes and unexpected growth. The most surprising development came 3 months after the newspaper article, when my mother reached out, asking if we could meet for coffee. Cautiously optimistic but protecting my heart, I agreed to see her at a neutral location. She arrived looking nervous but determined, and before I could even greet her properly, she said something I never thought I would hear. "I am sorry, Gage. Truly and completely sorry for all the ways I failed you. Over the next 2 hours, she explained that she had begun seeing a therapist of her own, prompted by our confrontation and the subsequent soul-searching it had triggered. She had realized how her desire to keep peace in the family had come at the expense of her relationship with her son. I kept thinking I was protecting you by asking you to fit in, she admitted. But I was really protecting myself from having to stand up to the family, from having to challenge the narrow thinking I grew up with. Our relationship began to rebuild slowly from that day. Weekly coffee dates became monthly dinners, sometimes with Jason joining us. We established boundaries and honored them. When she occasionally slipped into old patterns, I gently but firmly pointed them out, and to her credit, she listened and adjusted rather than becoming defensive. My sister Allison took longer to come around. 6 months after the confrontation, she reached out with a tentative text, asking how I was doing. Our first meeting was awkward, filled with surface-level conversation that carefully avoided any meaningful topics. But gradually, over several honest conversations, we began to rebuild a fragile connection. I was jealous, she confessed, during one particularly vulnerable exchange. You always knew exactly who you were, even when it was hard. I just became whoever I thought everyone wanted me to be. It wasn't as simple as that, I told her. I struggled every day with being authentic versus being accepted. It nearly broke me many times, but you never broke, she said softly. That's the difference between us. My father and uncles remained distant. My father occasionally asked about me through my mother, but made no direct effort to reconnect. Uncle Frank continued to avoid any mention of me at family gatherings, according to my mother. But Uncle Ray had begun asking questions about my life and work, showing a tentative interest that might someday evolve into something more. Professionally, the year brought unexpected opportunities. The wedding feature led to inquiries about my design work, and I eventually launched a small fashion line that celebrated individuality and self-expression. A major design magazine did a profile on me, mentioning my personal journey alongside my creative philosophy. Authenticity isn't just a buzzword for Gage Wilson, the article stated. It's the foundation of both his personal life and professional aesthetic. Jason's architectural practice thrived as well, focusing on creating spaces that fostered community and inclusion. We began collaborating occasionally, bringing our complementary skills to projects that required both structural vision and aesthetic sensitivity. Our chosen family remained the constant center of our lives. We created new holiday traditions that blended various cultural influences and personal meanings. Thanksgiving at our apartment became a joyous gathering of friends, colleagues, and, increasingly, the biological family members who had earned their way back into my life through genuine change and respect. Perhaps the most unexpected healing came through my grandmother Eliza, now in her 80s. She invited me to lunch one day, and when I arrived, she pulled from her purse the newspaper clipping of our wedding. I've kept this since it was published, she told me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I wanted to call you immediately, to tell you how proud I was, but I was afraid you wouldn't want to hear from any of us after everything that happened. She reached across the table to take my hand. You were always my brightest light, Gage. I am sorry I didn't stand up for that light more fiercely when you were young. As we ate, she shared stories I had never heard about her own struggles against family expectations in her youth, helping me understand the complex dynamics that had shaped multiple generations of our family. Her apology, unlike some others, came without qualifications or expectations. It was simply an acknowledgement of what should have been different, offered with love and respect for who I had become despite those challenges. The freedom that came from no longer seeking approval was perhaps the most profound change in my life. I had spent so many years trying to earn love that should have been freely given that I hadn't realized how much energy it consumed. Now, that energy could be directed toward creation, connection, and joy. I began mentoring LGBTQ+ youth who faced similar struggles with family acceptance, sharing both my challenges and the tools that had helped me navigate them. Seeing these young people begin to stand in their own truth, often inspired by my story, became one of the most rewarding aspects of my life. This Thanksgiving, our apartment filled with the beautiful chaos of chosen and biological family intermingling. My mother helped in the kitchen, getting to know Layla over cranberry sauce preparation. Jason's parents engaged my sister in animated conversation about her new job. Even Uncle Ray made a brief appearance. Awkward, but trying. Looking around at this unlikely gathering, I was struck by the journey that had brought us here. It hadn't been easy, and it wasn't perfect. Some wounds would never fully heal. Some family members would never make the effort to truly know me. But I had created something beautiful from the broken pieces of expectations and disappointments. I had learned that family isn't defined by blood or tradition. It's created through acceptance, effort, and the courage to see others as they truly are rather than as we wish them to be. Sometimes that means building something new rather than trying to fit into spaces too small for your spirit. That night, after everyone had left and Jason and I were cleaning up in comfortable silence, he paused to wrap his arms around me from behind. "Happy?" he asked simply. "Complete," I answered. Not because everything is perfect, but because I'm no longer waiting for permission to be who I am. And that, I realized, was the greatest wedding gift I could have received. Not approval or acceptance from those who had withheld it for so long, but the freedom to stop needing it altogether, to create a life and love so authentic that it became its own validation, its own celebration. Have you ever had to create your own celebration when the people who should have supported you couldn't or wouldn't? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember that your authenticity is never something to apologize for. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Thank you for being part of my journey. And remember, the family you choose is just as real and important as the one you're born into.